Well, this multi-year investigation targeted members of two Sereno street gangs in Oakland, and residents were shocked when the FBI showed up here in the Upper Diamond District.
At 4:17 a.m., East Oakland was still. The streets were empty, the air heavy with fog, and the only movement came from a slow line of armored vehicles sliding through the dark. Inside, agents from the FBI and DEA sat in silence, their radios set to a single encrypted channel. They had waited 4 years.
Two windows with a pancake deck.
When the first door came down, the neighborhood lit up. Flashbangs split the night, and tactical teams poured through the smoke with precision, room by room, name by name. Within minutes, 9 suspects were in custody, and the quiet street turned into a command post. But what began as a routine gang sweep changed instantly when analysts opened a seized laptop. Hidden behind layers of encryption was a coded ledger, symbols, payment logs, and messages sent from inside a California state prison. It meant that the men arrested here were not street thugs. They were soldiers obeying orders from inmates hundreds of miles away. Somewhere behind bars, someone was running Oakland. How could a prison cell control an entire city block? Stay with me, and if you want more missions like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to Military Power. The discovery inside that encrypted laptop shattered the illusion that Oakland's gang problem was local. It wasn't. The data showed transactions, coordinates, and contact lists all pointing to the same command source: an inmate serving a life sentence in California's Pelican Bay State Prison. From behind reinforced walls, the Mexican Mafia had built an empire that moved money, drugs, and orders with military precision. The FBI called it an invisible command chain. The system functioned through an underground economy known as the prison tax. Every street crew operating under the Sereno banner owed a percentage of its profits to leaders inside the penitentiary. Payment wasn't just expected, it was enforced. Failure meant retaliation, sometimes carried out within 24 hours. The orders didn't need phones or the internet. They traveled through coded notes smuggled in laundry, legal mail, or even memorized by visiting relatives. On the surface, the streets of East Oakland looked ordinary. Colo Street smelled of coffee and gasoline, the kind of place where neighbors nod at one another on their way to work. But beneath that normalcy, the area functioned as a logistics network. Houses that looked abandoned served as stash points for narcotics. Garages doubled as cutting stations. Surveillance cameras were disguised inside porch lamps to watch for police cars. Agents discovered that shipments of methamphetamine and fentanyl entered through southern routes, San Isidro, Calexico, Nogales, and were trucked north under legitimate shipping manifests. The packaging carried labels for cleaning supplies and construction tools. Each load was logged in a digital ledger linked to prepaid crypto wallets. The same digital pattern repeated in multiple seizures. Money moved in small amounts, scattered across different wallets, then recombined into a single account traced back to a prison commissary deposit. The deeper investigators went, the more organized it looked. The Serenos didn't behave like a loose street gang. They resembled a corporate structure. At the top was the shot caller in prison, who approved hits and settled disputes. Beneath him were lieutenants controlling city zones, then runners who moved product and collected payments. Each role had redundancy. If one was arrested, another filled the gap within hours. It was self-repairing by design. Inside one of the seized houses, agents found a whiteboard covered with initials and numbers. At first glance, it looked like a list of phone contacts. But when cross-checked with DEA intel, each set of letters matched license plates, dates, and cross streets where deliveries had been made. The board was a crude but effective operations map. Alongside it hung a small religious calendar with 2 dates circled in red. Both coincided with scheduled prison visitations at Pelican Bay. That connection was the breakthrough. By aligning visitation logs with intercepted crypto payments, analysts identified couriers acting as human links between inmates and field crews. They weren't typical gang members. Some were delivery drivers, others legal assistants, or social workers who thought they were transporting harmless paperwork. The Mafia had turned ordinary citizens into unwitting messengers. Then came the most disturbing discovery. One of the encrypted ledger codes matched an internal notation used by the California Department of Justice. Someone inside the system was leaking federal identifiers, codes that confirmed whether surveillance targets were active or closed. That leak explained why several prior operations had failed. Each time agents prepared a raid, suspects disappeared hours beforehand. The task force realized it wasn't chasing a street gang anymore. It was dismantling a parallel intelligence network embedded within law enforcement itself. Meetings turned from routine briefings into counter-espionage sessions. Phones were banned from the war room. Only handwritten notes were used. A new investigative cell was formed under direct FBI oversight to trace the breach. Following the digital trail, agents mapped financial flows through shell businesses registered under false names, laundromats, pawn shops, and small churches scattered across Oakland and Stockton. Each entity moved just enough cash to stay invisible to auditors. Yet together, they funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars every month into the same chain of prison accounts. When investigators froze those accounts, something unexpected happened. Coded chatter spiked across the gang's encrypted channels. The field operators began to panic, assuming a rival faction was responsible. The chaos provided a rare advantage. Surveillance teams moved in, intercepting conversations and tracking vehicles that visited a storage warehouse on Fruitvale Avenue. Cameras hidden in nearby rooftops captured trucks arriving late at night, unloading sealed crates marked as donations. Inside those crates were narcotics, firearms, and digital storage devices. Each hard drive contained duplicate copies of the same encrypted logs found in the earlier raid. It was evidence of centralized coordination, a backup system. The Mafia anticipated arrests and data seizures, so it distributed information across multiple safe houses to ensure survival. By now, the FBI understood that patience was no longer an option. The leak within the justice system was still active, and each passing week gave the network time to adapt. The decision was made. The next phase would no longer be investigative. It would be tactical. Over the following nights, surveillance drones scanned the designated blocks, marking every entry point, heat signature, and vehicle route. Analysts ran simulations on timing, 5-second breaching windows, choke points, and extraction zones. Local officers were briefed at the last possible minute to prevent information leaks. By the eve of the operation, tension inside the command center was tangible. Maps covered the walls, showing red pins for known safe houses and blue pins for potential escape routes. Teams rehearsed silent entries with dummy targets. Outside, unmarked vehicles idled near intersections to cut off any movement once the raid began. For 4 years, the Mexican Mafia had moved like a shadow through Oakland. This time, the shadow would face the light. If you uncovered a leak inside the justice system, how far would you go to stop it? They decided to go all in. The discovery of the internal leak left no other choice. The FBI, DEA, and Oakland Police Department formed a single command under federal authority. The mission plan, codenamed Operation Deep Cut, called for precision, synchronization, and overwhelming force. Its goal was to break the communication chain between the Mexican Mafia's prison leadership and its street enforcers in one strike. The countdown began at midnight. Inside a converted warehouse used as the command post, the air was electric. Screens glowed with satellite feeds, drone telemetry, and the pulse of encrypted radios. Each icon on the map represented a safe house, vehicle, or suspect, color-coded for timing. Analysts monitored live camera angles from above Fruitvale Avenue and Colo Street, while tactical leaders whispered final adjustments. By 3:45 a.m., all units were in position. The assault teams moved under complete blackout. The Bearcat armored trucks rolled first, their engines barely audible beneath the drone of overhead rotors. SWAT snipers covered rooftops, while ground teams stacked against front doors marked with red infrared dots. A single radio burst signaled the start. Within seconds, flashbangs tore through the night. Windows shattered, alarms echoed, and shadows darted through the fog as agents breached one target after another. Each house followed the same choreography: breach, clear, secure, extract. The first team entered a narrow two-story building on Colo Street, where they encountered armed resistance. Bullets sparked off metal shields. Agents returned fire with controlled bursts. In the confusion, a propane tank exploded, sending a wave of heat and dust through the hallway. Despite the chaos, the suspects were subdued in less than 3 minutes. 2 wounded gang members were pulled out alive for interrogation. On Fruitvale Avenue, the DEA team faced a different challenge. The safe house there contained a basement, converted into a storage bunker. Inside were crates labeled as donations and construction materials. When opened, they revealed hundreds of vacuum-sealed packs of methamphetamine and cocaine. The walls were lined with false panels concealing handguns, ammunition, and tactical vests. Even more valuable were the paper ledgers taped beneath a table, listing coded payments to prison inmates. At 4:22 a.m., an FBI technical unit breached a third site, a small office that appeared to be a community center. Behind its locked door sat a server rack, humming quietly. The data inside connected every cell in Oakland's Sereno network. One drive contained surveillance footage from street cameras that law enforcement didn't own. The gang had built its own monitoring grid, watching police patrol routes in real time. The server also held chat logs referencing "clear skies," a phrase later decoded as permission to execute hits. By 4:30, the operation covered 6 city blocks. Drones circled above, capturing infrared images of suspects fleeing into backyards. Tactical officers moved fast, clearing structures before backup could arrive. The coordination was flawless. One target after another went dark. Then came the unexpected. A van parked 2 streets away suddenly accelerated toward a SWAT checkpoint. It ignored warning signs and rammed a patrol vehicle. Inside were 3 gang members carrying AR-style rifles. Agents opened fire, disabling the engine. When the smoke cleared, the men were taken alive and their phones were seized. Forensic teams would later find encrypted apps that matched data on the earlier laptop. 9 arrests were confirmed before dawn. Among those captured were 2 field lieutenants directly linked to Pelican Bay Command. They carried cash, weapons, and coded messages disguised as folded prayer cards. Every item was tagged, photographed, and transported to a temporary evidence facility set up in an Oakland high school gym. The aftermath was controlled chaos. Agents in respirators sifted through debris, collecting powder samples and identifying substances. Hazmat units secured chemicals used to cut fentanyl. Crime scene technicians mapped bullet trajectories to reconstruct the firefight. In another corner, FBI analysts connected seized laptops to portable decryption rigs, copying every byte of data before the hardware went into evidence storage. One agent noticed a small metal case inside a dresser drawer. It contained a USB drive with a gold label. Unremarkable, but password locked with a triple encryption layer. When opened under lab conditions hours later, it revealed a set of digital ledgers, identical in format to those found earlier, except these were far larger. They contained lists of coded transactions, geographic coordinates, and references to bank accounts in Nevada and Arizona. That single discovery changed the scale of the case. The USB showed that the Oakland cell wasn't acting alone. It was one node in a regional web extending across multiple states. Some coordinates even matched previous narcotic seizures in Los Angeles and San Diego, suggesting a unified command structure managed from inside prison walls. By sunrise, the main objectives of Operation Deep Cut were complete. Streets were sealed, suspects detained, and all known sites secured. Reporters began gathering at the perimeter, unaware of what had unfolded hours earlier. From the outside, it looked like just another gang raid. Inside the command post, however, agents knew they had struck at the backbone of the Mexican Mafia's northern network. Federal prosecutors began drafting preliminary indictments under the RICO statute, but the investigation was far from finished. The encrypted USB still contained hidden layers, parts of the code that forensic analysts hadn't yet cracked. Each fragment pointed to potential offshore exchanges, hinting that the prison network was using global digital channels beyond U.S. jurisdiction. As the sun rose over Oakland, the air smelled of smoke and diesel. The streets were quiet again, but the silence felt different now, heavier, deliberate, as if the city itself was waiting for what would come next. For years, the Mexican Mafia had hidden behind the chaos of street violence. Now, for the first time, the investigators had pulled back the curtain and glimpsed the machinery beneath. The encrypted USB was more than evidence. It was a roadmap. And the moment its contents were revealed, the story of Oakland would no longer belong to the streets. It would belong to the system that built them. What they found on that USB changed everything. The decrypted data from the gold-labeled USB revealed a truth larger than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just a list of transactions or street payments, it was a living map of power. Each line of code represented a contract, a shipment, or a death order. Every coordinate connected to a different city. What had started as a raid in East Oakland now linked to dozens of operations stretching across the western United States. Analysts spent 72 hours decoding the files. The first layer showed transfers in cryptocurrency, small deposits routed through dozens of digital wallets. The second layer revealed shell companies registered under fake names in Nevada, Arizona, and Washington. One of them listed a board of directors who didn't exist. Their social security numbers matched deceased citizens. The third layer was the most disturbing. An internal hierarchy written in code, complete with promotions, penalties, and tax records. Each symbol corresponded to a person, and many of those symbols belonged to inmates still serving time. This was the prison economy, self-sustaining, global, and invisible to the public eye. While ordinary Americans debated local crime rates, a parallel financial system thrived beneath their streets. From the safety of maximum security cells, the Mexican Mafia controlled a supply chain that rivaled legitimate corporations in complexity. Forensic teams traced one specific wallet to a restaurant in Modesto. On paper, it sold tacos and bottled soda. In reality, it laundered over $400,000 in drug profits through food deliveries and catering events. Its manager was the cousin of a current Pelican Bay inmate, the same man whose name appeared in the original Oakland Ledger. From there, agents followed a pattern. Every new discovery led back to a prison contact, a family member, or a false charity registered under the same tax number. The scale forced the Department of Justice to expand the task force. The DEA provided narcotics specialists, the IRS supplied forensic accountants, and the U.S. Marshal Service joined to handle arrests. Together, they created a unified cell under the FBI's Western Organized Crime Division. Their mission changed from containment to dismantlement. In the weeks following the raid, hundreds of pages of financial evidence were compiled. Analysts cross-referenced payments with prison visitation schedules, finding that each major deposit occurred within 24 hours of an inmate meeting. Lawyers, social workers, and even janitors were sometimes listed as visitors. In some cases, money moved immediately after their trips. It meant the gang had built a messaging network using legitimate access points. But what struck investigators most was the sophistication. Ledger entries used phrases like silver days and black dust, code for different drug types. Another file listed North Clouds, a reference to new territories in Oregon and Washington. The same document mentioned red lines, which analysts decoded as kill orders. One of those red lines matched the date of an unsolved homicide in East LA from 2 years earlier. The revelation shocked prosecutors. This was not regional crime. It was interstate terrorism fueled by narcotics revenue. The federal government moved fast, using the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO. A grand jury authorized sweeping indictments covering murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, and money laundering. 9 defendants from the Oakland raids were among those charged. Several pleaded not guilty, but 2 began cooperating, offering insight into how the system truly operated. Their testimonies described a structure that resembled a military chain of command. Orders flowed downward through encrypted communications, and loyalty was ensured by fear and incentive. Prison leaders maintained morale by distributing honor payments to families of imprisoned members. In return, no one spoke to police, and no one defected. Inside the prison, enforcement was psychological. A single word written on a note could decide life or death. Guards often found these notes, called kites, during cell inspections, but they were nearly impossible to decode without context. Each kite carried only fragments, initials, numbers, and short phrases. When the FBI matched recovered kites with data from the USB, they finally understood their meaning. The entire state penal system had been used as an encrypted messaging hub. As this became clear, the Department of Corrections initiated internal reviews. Surveillance footage from visitation rooms showed subtle exchanges, a nod, a folded paper, a glance lasting 2 seconds longer than normal. Those gestures had been communications all along. The deeper the agencies dug, the more they saw how the organization mimicked digital warfare. The Mafia had compartmentalized every piece of its operation: money, drugs, weapons, communication. If one channel was compromised, the others stayed intact. It was resilience through division, and the same strategy used by modern intelligence agencies. Publicly, authorities called the case a major disruption. Privately, they called it a wake-up call. Behind every street corner conflict was a centralized intelligence network, not unlike a small nation-state. The indictments made headlines across California. Morning news shows called it the biggest blow to the Mexican Mafia in a decade. Yet for the agents who led Operation Deep Cut, victory felt partial. They knew the real enemy wasn't just a list of names. It was a system that regenerated faster than it could be prosecuted. To stay ahead, the FBI began using counterintelligence methods normally reserved for espionage cases. Behavioral analysts mapped leadership personalities, cyber teams traced crypto trails in real time, and field operatives infiltrated outer layers posing as couriers. The fight had evolved into something closer to a Cold War than a criminal investigation. Despite the progress, one fact remained: the encrypted files contained references to Phase 2. Analysts didn't know whether it meant expansion, retaliation, or reorganization. Surveillance units later intercepted drone footage of suspected gang lookouts filming police patrols from rooftops. It suggested that while one network was collapsing, another was quietly rebuilding. Community response in Oakland was mixed. Some residents expressed relief, others feared backlash. Local officials pushed for additional patrols and neighborhood watch programs. The city's homicide rate dropped temporarily, but graffiti began appearing on walls again, coded messages welcoming new management. For law enforcement, it was a reminder that no victory lasted long. By late summer, federal prosecutors prepared for trial. The evidence filled entire rooms: firearms, cash, ledgers, servers, and thousands of digital documents. The courtroom phase would take months, maybe years. But within the agencies, attention had already shifted to what came next. The USB hinted at other regions: Colorado, Texas, even the Midwest. The structure wasn't gone, it was evolving. The director of the Joint Task Force summarized the situation in a debriefing memo. "We are not dismantling a gang. We are confronting an economy of control." Outside the federal building, reporters waited for updates. Cameras clicked, lights flashed, and sound bites dominated the news cycle. Yet the real work happened in silence, inside secure rooms, among analysts who now understood that organized crime was no longer local or linear. It was systemic, adaptive, and embedded. What Operation Deep Cut revealed was not just the strength of law enforcement, but the magnitude of what it faced. The United States had long treated gangs as fragmented threats. Now it saw them for what they were: hybrid entities merging digital finance, prison command, and urban enforcement into one continuous machine. The files from the USB proved that power could thrive in confinement, and that even a prison cell could become a boardroom. But they also showed something else. Every system has a pattern, and every pattern can be broken. Can a system this deep ever be truly dismantled? No criminal network lasts forever when the system built to stop it refuses to stand still. In the weeks after Operation Deep Cut, courtrooms filled with evidence, and the streets of East Oakland began to breathe again. The armored trucks were gone, but their shadow lingered. A reminder that someone had fought to reclaim those blocks. Behind sealed doors in Washington, agents reviewed the case one final time. The verdict was clear. The raids had crippled the Mexican Mafia's northern command, cut the prison link, and disrupted a financial chain worth millions. Yet the lesson was greater than the victory itself. The enemy hadn't just been a gang, it was complacency. The slow erosion of vigilance that allowed control to slip behind prison walls. Now, those walls have eyes. Federal task forces continue to monitor encrypted channels, prisons reinforce surveillance, and communities rebuild trust. The battle isn't over, but the balance has shifted. America's strength has never been in silence. It lies in its ability to adapt, to fight back, and to endure. Justice moves quietly, but it never stops. America still stands guard, and so do we. If you believe these stories of courage and truth deserve to be told, like this video, subscribe to Military Power, and stay with us, because the next mission could change everything.